Welcome to Miss Retro Reads. We're continuing with Robinson Crusoe, and we might get to the end today. One morning I went out into the woods to kill a goat and took Friday with me. I intended to go over to my own enclosure and get one of my own flock, but on the way I saw a she-goat and her two kids laying under the shade of a tree. I caught hold of Friday and made signs to him not to stir. Then I aimed and killed one of the kids. My companion was terrified at the sound of the shot. He had not noticed that I had killed one of the kids. He ripped open his jacket to feel where he was wounded, as he thought I had resolved to kill him. When he found that he was unharmed, he came and knelt down before me, embraced my knees, and said a great many things I did not understand. I could easily see that he was begging me not to kill him. I took him by the hand, laughed at him, and pointed to the kid which I had killed. Beckoned to him to run and fetch it, which he did. By and by I saw a parrot sitting upon a tree within shot. So, to let Friday understand a little what I would do, I pointed first to the parrot, and then to my gun, and last to the ground under the tree, and bade him to watch the bird fall. Notwithstanding all I had said to him, he was again terribly frightened. I believed if I had let him, he would have worshipped me and the gun. As for the gun itself, he would not so much as touch it for several days. When Friday tasted the stewed kid, he showed that he liked it very much. The next day I roasted a piece, and he showed even more pleasure. He made me understand he would never eat human flesh any more. As the days went by, I taught him to beat and shift corn and to make bread. His devotion to me was most touching. I dare say he would have sacrificed his life to save mine upon any occasion whatsoever. I became more and more delighted with him, and I spared no effort to teach him everything I could that would make him useful, handy, and helpful. Especially did I endeavor to make him speak and understand me when I spoke. After I had taught him English so that he could understand me fairly well, I asked him how it was that he had come to be taken prisoner. He replied, "They more many than my nation in the place where me was. They took 1, 2, 3, and me. My nation overbeat them where me no was. There my nation take 1, 2, great thousand. But why did not your side recover you from your enemies?" I said. Friday answered, "Because they make me go in canoe. My nation have no canoe that time." "What does your nation do with the prisoners they capture?" I questioned. "Do they carry them away and eat them?" "Yes, my nation eat man too," said Friday, looking ashamed. "Sometimes they come here, often come other else place." This interested me, and I asked him if he had ever been on my island with them at other times. "Yes," he replied. "I been here," pointed to the northwest side of the island. Friday then went on to tell me how he had been on the island once when they had eaten up 20 men, 2 women, and 1 child. He could not tell 20 in English, but laid out stones to that number. I asked him 1,000 questions about his country, and he told me all he knew. He said his sort of people were called Caribs, but farther west there were white-bearded men like me, and that they had killed much mans. I understood from that he meant the Spaniards. As time passed away, I talked much to Friday about God, and he became a very good Christian. When he could understand me well, I told him of the countries of Europe and how I came to be on the island. He said that a boat had come ashore in his country with 17 white men in it. I was delighted when he told me that the 17 white men were living with his people now. One day we were up on the hill at the east side of the island. Friday, who was looking easternly towards the mainland, suddenly cried out, "Oh joy, oh glad! There see my country!" That set me to thinking whether I could not make the voyage with Friday, or send him alone to see if the white men were still there. When I proposed to Friday that he go alone to see his people, he said he would like to go, but that he would not leave me. I therefore resolved to make a canoe large enough for both of us and venture forth. We felled a tree near the water, and after 2 months of hard labor, we had shaped a boat and gotten her into the sea. I was surprised to see how quickly Friday learned to manage, turn, and paddle her along. I made a mast and a sail and fitted her out with an anchor and cable. Friday knew very well how to paddle the canoe, but he knew nothing of what belonged to the sail and rudder and was quite amazed when he saw me working them. However, I soon made these things familiar to him, and he became an expert sailor. There was one thing I could not make him understand, and that was the compass. Before we got started, the rainy season was upon us, and we had to postpone our voyage and stay indoors. When we began to go out again, I sent Friday down to the shore one day to find a turtle. In a short time, he came flying over my outer wall in a great fright, crying out to me, "Oh, oh, bad!" "What's the matter, Friday?" said I. "Oh, yonder there," cried he. 2, 3 canoes. 1, 2, 3. The poor creature was so frightened that I hardly knew what to do with him. He trembled in every limb, so sure was he that the men coming would come back to eat him. "Friday," I said, "we must fight them, and you must help me all you can." He assured me he would, even saying, "Me die when you die." I hurriedly loaded the 2 fowling pieces, 4 muskets, and 2 pistols. I hung my great sword by my side and gave Friday my hatchet. When I had thus prepared, I went up to the hill, and looking through my perspective glasses, saw 21 men, 3 prisoners, and 2 canoes. It was easy to be seen that they had come ashore to have another of those dreadful feasts of human bodies. I was so indignant that I rushed back to Friday, who by this time had gotten over his fright, and told him that we must go down to the shore and kill these barbarians. In this fit of fury, I gave Friday 1 pistol to stick in his girdle and 3 guns to carry on his shoulders. I took a pistol and 3 remaining muskets. Friday carried a large bag with more powder and bullets, and I placed a bottle of rum in one of my pockets. I charged him to keep close behind me and not to stir or shoot or do anything till I bade him. We crept stealthily forward, hiding behind trees and shrubbery. Finally, we came within firing distance, and I was filled with horror to see a white man, evidently one of the bearded men that Friday had told me about, laying on the sand, bound hand and foot. We had now not a moment to lose, for 19 of the dreadful men sat upon the ground, all closely huddled together. They had just sent to the other 2 to butcher the poor Christian, for we could see them stooping down to untie his hands and feet. "Now, Friday," said I, "do exactly as you see me do." So I sat down one of the muskets and the fowling pieces upon the ground, and with the other musket took aim at the circle round the fire. Friday aimed so much better than I, that on the side that he shot he killed 2 and wounded 3 more. On my side I killed 1 and wounded 2. A regular panic ensued. Those of the men who were not hurt jumped to their feet, but did not know which way to run or which way to look. As soon as the first shot was made, I threw down my gun and took up another. Friday did the same, and waited for the order to fire. We only killed 2 men this time, as our guns were loaded with small pistol bullets, but we wounded so many that they ran about yelling and screaming like mad creatures. "Now, Friday," said I, laying down the discharged pieces, and taking up the musket which was yet loaded, "follow me." We went directly towards the poor victim, who was still laying on the beach. The 2 butchers who were beside him when we first fired, had fled in fright to the seaside and had jumped into the canoe. 3 more of the rest made away in the same manner. I told Friday to run down and fire at them, which he did, killing 2 and badly wounding a third. In the meantime, I cut the flags that bound the poor victim and gave him a drink from my bottle, a piece of bread, which he quickly ate. Seeing that he was somewhat recovered, I gave him my sword and a pistol, and told him that he had any strength left at all to get up and help us fight. He was a Spaniard, but understood English. He took the weapons thankfully, and as if they gave him new vigor, he flew upon his murderers like a fury. Shortly after, I saw him in deadly combat with a powerful man who was wringing my sword out of his hands. I hastened to his side, but he wisely dropped the sword and shot his enemy through the body. We fought desperately and succeeded in killing them all except the 3 who escaped in a canoe, of whom 1 was wounded, if not dead. But it would never do to let these 3 carry the news home to their people, for they would surely return with 200 or 300 canoes and devour us. So we determined to pursue them by sea. We were about to enter one of their abandoned canoes when we recovered a prisoner laying in the bottom of the boat, tied hand and foot. Imagine Friday's surprise and joy when he found that it was no other than his own long-lost father. It would have moved anyone to tears to see how Friday kissed and hugged his father. He jumped about, dancing and singing, and then wept. This put an end to our pursuit of the other men, who had now almost disappeared from sight. It was lucky for us that we did not attempt to follow them for about 2 hours. Later, a dreadful storm arose. When we reached home, neither the Spaniard nor Friday's father was able to climb the ladder. Their limbs were in such a stiffened condition from having been bound so long. We made them a tent outside, and in a few days they were well and strong again. I sent Friday to inquire of his father if he thought that the men who had escaped would come back with reinforcements. He was of the opinion that even if they had outlived the storm that night, they would never return, for he had heard them talking, and they thought Friday and Robinson Crusoe were 2 heavenly spirits, or furies. It was impossible for them to conceive that a man could dart fire, speak thunder, and kill at a distance. In my discourse with the Spaniard, who told me how he and 13 others had been shipwrecked on the coast, and that his companions were all alive, but in a state of great want, I resolved to increase our stock of goats and grain sufficient to feed them all, and then to send for them. At the proper season we fell to work digging, and planted as much grain as we could. At last we sent Friday's father and the Spaniard over to the mainland, and after they had been gone about 8 days, a strange thing happened. I was looking out to sea one morning, when I beheld a small boat with shoulder of mutton sail, heading for our shore. I ran for my perspective glass, and soon discovered a ship laying out an anchor about 1.5 leagues out. When the small boat, which appeared to be an English longboat, reached the shore, 11 men landed. 3 of them were unarmed and appeared to be prisoners. These 3 sat down on the ground, very pensive, and looked like men in despair. The others rambled about the island as if they wanted to see what kind of a place they were in. As soon as the other men were out of sight, Friday and I went up to the 3 distressed creatures and asked them who they were. They were very much startled at our sudden approach and frightened at my uncouth appearance. I calmed their fears and told them I was ready to help them if they were in trouble. And then one of them spoke up and said, "I was a commander of that ship out there. My man mutinied against me and were going to murder me, but were finally persuaded not to do so." Instead, they have set me on shore in this desolate place with these 2 men, one my mate and the other a passenger, where they intended to leave us to perish. I then told him that I would venture to deliver them and his companions upon 2 conditions. First, that while he stayed on the island, he was to have no authority, but was to be governed by my orders. Second, that if the ship should be recovered, he was to carry Friday and myself back to England, passage free. The captain willingly agreed to these reasonable demands, and whereupon gave each of them a musket and powder. We then went in search of the villains, and came upon them asleep in a grove. The captain was loath to kill the men, yet he said that there were 2 villains amongst them who had been the authors of the mutiny in the ship. If they escaped, he feared they would go on board and return with all the ship's company and destroy us all. In the middle of our discourse, 2 of the men awoke and cried out to the rest, but they were too late, for our party fired, and one of the 2 leaders was killed on the spot and the other badly wounded. The captain then told the others that he would spare their lives if they would give up their mutiny and obey his orders. This they promised to do. We took no chances, however, but bounded all our prisoners. Then we went down to the small boat, took everything out of it, and dragged it up beyond the reach of the high tide. After a while, another boat put off from the ship, with 10 men in her, all armed. 8 of them landed and started inland to find their companions. I immediately sent Friday and the captain's mate over beyond the little creek to a piece of rising ground, told them to halloo as loud as they could. As soon as the seamen answered, they were to call out again, and in the meantime, by taking a roundabout way and keeping all ways out of sight, they were to lead them into the island as far as possible. The strategy worked well, and it was dark before they all got back. In the meantime, we had overcome the 2 men left in the boat. They begged for mercy and agreed to help put down the mutiny if the captain would but spare their lives. When the 8 men came back to the boat in the dark, I made one of the 2 whom we had just taken prisoner call out, "Tom Smith, for the love of God, throw down your arms and yield, or you are all dead men this moment." "Whom must we yield to? Where are they?" said Smith quickly. "Here they are," he replied. "Here's our captain and 50 men with him. They've been hunting you these 2 hours. If you do not yield at once, you are all lost." Then the captain called out that if they would lay down their arms, the governor of the island, by whom he meant me, would spare all their lives, except that of Will Atkins. He had been the first to mutiny and lay hold of the captain. It was very dark, and they could not tell how many men were really pursuing them, so they decided to lay down their arms. We then bound them and took some to the cave, and the others to my bower. The captain talked matter over with the prisoners, and after picking out those that he could trust, he set out for the ship, reaching her after midnight. After a short fight, the rebel captain was killed, and the order was restored. The captain and some of his men then came back to the island and brought me a lot of provisions and several outfits of clothing. The clothing was a very kind and agreeable present, but I must confess that I felt most awkward when I first put it on. After dressing in my new clothes so as to look more like a real governor than when in my goatskins, I had the rebels brought before me. I told them that their rebel captain had been killed, and that I was now considering executing them as pirates. I told them that I had resolved to quit the island with all my men and take passage for England. Upon this they begged that I would let them stay on the island, to which I gave my consent. Friday and I did not wait for the return of his father and the Spaniard, but I told the men the story of the Spaniard, that were to be expected and left a letter for them. They promised to treat the newcomer well and share things with them. When I quit the island, I took my great goatskin cap and umbrella, one of my parrots, and all the money I had taken off the 2 shipwrecked vessels, and which up to this time had been perfectly useless to me. We set sail the 19th of December, 1686. I had lived on the island 28 years, 2 months, and 19 days. After a 6 months' voyage, we reached England. I had been gone so long that I was as much a stranger as if I had never been known there. I went down to Yorkshire, but found my parents were dead and all the family extinct, except 2 sisters and 2 of the children of one of my brothers. In the meantime, the captain told the owners of the vessel how I had saved the ship, and they made up a purse of $1,000 for me. With this money, I resolved to go to Lisbon and see if I could get any news from my plantations in Brazil. Friday accompanied me and proved to be a most faithful man. At Lisbon, I found my old friend, the captain of the Portuguese vessel that had picked me up when I was escaping from the Moors. He was a very old man now and had not been in Brazil in 9 years. However, he assured me that the last time he was there, my plantation was in a flourishing condition. I prepared the necessary papers and sent them by a ship sailing to Brazil, and in about 7 months I received a large packet from my surviving trustees, giving a full account of my plantation. It had kept improving all these years, and I was now the master of a fine estate and 50,000 pounds sterling in money. The truest sent me, besides the gold, 1,200 chests of sugar and 100 rolls of tobacco. I was so overcome by their news and the reception of the great riches that I felt sick, but soon recovered and decided to return with Friday to England. I had had so much of the sea that I resolved to return by land. That is, except from the Calais to Dover. After several thrilling adventures in the Pyrenees Mountains with wolves and bears, we finally reached England. I was glad to get back and made up my mind to stop roving. I married and lived happily for many years. I had 3 children, 2 sons and a daughter. I sold my plantation in Brazil and was now very wealthy and able to help the remaining members of my family. One of my nephews I brought up as a gentleman, and the other I placed in a ship as a captain. He was a bold and sensible young man, and in 5 years I gave him a good ship and sent him to sea. After 7 years of peace and happiness, my wife died, and to relieve my grief I decided to go to sea with my nephew, who promised to make a trip to my island. I took a cargo of useful things, such as wearing apparel, beds, bedding, kitchen utensils, guns, and powder. I persuaded 2 carpenters, a smith, a tailor, and a very handy, ingenious fellow to go along with us and make the island their future home. I offered them a sum of money, which made it worth their while. When we landed there was excitement. Friday spied his father the first thing, and their meeting was most touching. The Spaniard, whose life I had saved when the men were preparing to kill him, was now governor of the island. At first the Spaniard, who had come over from the mainland, and the members of the ship's crew, whom I had left there when I returned to England, did not get along very well, but now everything was running along smoothly. The island was in a most prosperous condition, and no one was at all anxious to leave it. They were more than grateful to me for the presents I brought them, and gave a warm welcome to the skilled workers who accompanied us. I then left the island, promised to send them some cattle, sheep, hogs, and cows as soon as we touched at Brazil. About 3 days after we had sailed, while we were becalmed, a great fleet of canoes was seen approaching us. When they came close enough, Friday went out on deck and called to them in his language. Whether they understood him or not, I never knew, for they let fly about 300 arrows, and to my inexpressible grief killed poor Friday. I was so enraged at the loss of my old trusty friend and companion that I ordered the guns to be loaded and gave them such a broadside that 13 or 14 of their canoes were split and upset. The men all set a-swimming. The rest, frightened out of their wits, rowed away as fast as they could. Poor honest Friday. We buried him at sea. I had 11 guns fired in his honor. Thus ended the life of the most grateful, faithful, honest, and affectionate man that ever was. When we arrived at Brazil, I fitted out a ship and loaded it with a cargo that I had promised to send my tenants on the island. From Brazil, we sailed around the Cape of Good Hope, visited India and China, and after many thrilling adventures, I returned at last to England. And here, resolving to fatigue myself no more, I am preparing for a long journey than any of these, having lived a life of infinite variety, 72 years, and learned sufficiently to know the value of retirement and the blessing of ending one's days in peace. The end. I hope you've enjoyed this shortened version of Robinson Crusoe. I'm thinking of just doing 2 books a week because my schedule has gotten very busy. So I'm not sure I will be reading on Friday and Saturday anymore, but I still will be reading to you on Wednesdays and Sundays. So come back for that, and thanks for listening to Miss Retro Reads.